Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Behind the Headlines, where we're going to be discussing how Generation Z, or the TikTok generation, is being indoctrinated by Hamas on social media, poisoning their hearts and minds against Israel. On the 7th of October, Israel was hit by the biggest mass terror attack in Israel's history by Hamas, and Israel has responded by launching a ground offensive into Gaza to destroy the Islamist terror organization. Hamas is fighting back through a social media war which is aiming to demonize Israel and indoctrinate an entire generation into hatred of Israel and the Jewish people. We'll be discussing why TikTok, the social media platform of choice for Generation Z, has an essential need to share the truth of what is actually going on, but how it's being corrupted and distorted to take and capture hearts and minds against God's people, the Jews. Simon, great to be on the program. It's very important to talk about this.
No, very much so. I'm used to fighting the media war. I have done for a long time, going back to 2002 with Israel's second intifada. And then the major Israel media war, that was in 2006, when Israel was against Hezbollah. I was working with the kind of mainstream media there to get Israel's narrative out there and to get the truth of Israel's story told. But now it's a completely different climate now. Israel doesn't just have to contend with trying to winning the narrative in the media war, and in terms of mainstream media and its coverage of Israel. It has this new war to contend with, and that's the rise of social media, the likes of Instagram, YouTube, and in the sake of this program, we're talking about how Generation Z or Generation Z, or how they are now called Generation TikTok, because of the social media platform known as TikTok, of how this is it's about 7.2 hours a day, the average person from Generation Z will actually spend on TikTok. And this is how they're seeing the world. This is the information and videos that are telling them about Israel and Israel's war against the genocidal terrorist organization that is Hamas. And so therefore we're seeing that Hamas is using TikTok as a platform in order to indoctrinate an entire generation. And we also know with this generation that when it comes to Israel, they very much support the Palestinian cause and pretty much ignorant on the whole situation. So this is why today is such an important program, particularly if you are grandparents and your grandchildren are on TikTok, or if you are parents and your children are on TikTok, or if you are part of Generation Z and you use TikTok. This program is very much for you, because we don't want you to become deceived with Hamas's social media war that's against Israel.
And it is indeed a social media war. Ever since the 7th of October, there's been a horrific multimedia propaganda war that's been posed against Israel. There's been fake news, bogus images, sinister manipulation of the varying media platforms that are there, particularly TikTok. Fake AI images as well have been generated to demonize Israel, indoctrinating and stirring up hate and anti-Semitism.
Absolutely, and also we see that Hamas is fighting back through social media to demonize Israel, which sadly is indoctrinating an entire generation to hate Israel and the Jewish people, leading to a huge rise of Jew hatred. We're seeing that Hamas and their Iranian supporters play on the ignorance of young people in the West, on their knowledge regarding the conflict of the Middle East. And now some young people on social media platform known as TikTok have been praising bin Laden's letter to America that was published in 2002, has gone viral on this social media platform, justifying the 9/11 attacks that occurred on America because of America's support for Israel. And we'll also be discussing why TikTok is the social media platform of choice for Generation Z, and a real need to share the gospel on this platform, but also to tell the truth about Israel's war against Hamas.
Now, the number of young people in the West falling for Hamas's propaganda war is it's quite great, and it's very troubling. Prior to the program, we just took a very brief look at TikTok, and truly the videos, some of the videos that are out there are incredibly disturbing, and you can only watch some of them and come away thinking many of these young people are themselves extremely mentally troubled and vulnerable and are being manipulated. They're easy to be used. They're there for the taking by insidious mechanisms that Hamas will be using. And it really is a tragedy. But there's a recent article that was written by Ami Orkabi and published in the Daily Mail under the title, "How Worrying Numbers of Young People Are Falling for Hamas's Dirty Tricks in the Propaganda War." And in this article, he shares his personal story of living in Israel and his family being under fire from Hamas rockets, how his 3 daughters had to flee to a bomb shelter for safety, and they can't go to school because the teachers have been called up by the IDF. Young people overall in the West are completely ignorant of what is going on in Israel and are vulnerable to being deceived by Hamas. Tragically, Simon, even young people I know in their early 20s have been buying hook, line, and sinker into this ideology, and they're regurgitating information that they have come across on social media. Many of them have come under the influence of culturally Marxist organizations like BLM, and they see that unequivocal support for, let's be very clear, not just for Palestine as an idea, but BLM has been very vocal in some categories of its support for Hamas. The BLM Chicago group posted the day after the attacks images, silhouette images of individuals on paragliders, the means through which many gained entrance, of course, into that music festival. And yet many of the young people are looking at this and saying, well, maybe they're fighting for freedom, or these are people pushing back and hitting back against, and they use those buzz terms always, colonialist, patriarchy, all of those things they lump in together. It's all buzz speak, but it somehow captures the easily manipulatable hearts and minds of Generation Z.
Absolutely. But do you want to explain to our viewers, maybe to our older viewers, and maybe including myself as well, who are not actually on TikTok? I won't go on TikTok for security grounds, but also the fact that how does TikTok work? Because it's a series of very short videos, isn't it? Is it like 5 or 6 seconds videos?
It varies. There are some longer videos, but generally the shorter the better. You can go for a couple of minutes on TikTok. You can post gospel messages. You can post motivational messages. I am on TikTok. I've used it a very little bit previously just to gauge kind of it as an effective strategy. I think it has a place definitely for conveying good news and gospel material by all means. At the same time, there are immense challenges. You mentioned the security concerns. I'm sure we'll touch base on a little bit more of that later. But it's very popular. It captures people with a short attention span, Generation Z, and the new generation, the Alpha generation, that's one under Generation Z, is incredibly afflicted with a short attention span. And so we're talking about 30-second, 1-minute bursts. And I'll be seeing sometimes, Simon, people scroll through, and they'll be on a video for like 5 seconds, and then they'll scroll through the next. They might capture their attention for 10 seconds, 15 seconds, then they'll scroll through to the next, 30 seconds, maybe a minute, then they'll go through to the next. And you have all sorts. There's dancing videos, there's videos using AI generation. Some of them are very silly and goofy. Some are trying to make a point. Even messages that are meant to be very substantive and positive often have some sort of semi-sarcastic, kind of goofy way of presentation. And this is very, very effective in reaching some people.
Absolutely, and it's all controlled by the Chinese government, and this is why there's concerns about security, because it acts as a harvest to harvest all your data on your phone and everything else. So over the last few years, we've had governments warning, including members of the British cabinet, not to be on TikTok because this is a spy This is an implement used by the Chinese regime in order to spy on people's own personal phones. So anyway, so let's have a look at this excellent article published last week in the Daily Mail. And this goes to the extent of how people are so ignorant when it comes to Israel's war against Hamas. So this one, it says, this was vividly illustrated recently by an exercise carried out by the Jewish American comedian Mickey Greenblatt on the streets of New York. He accosted people at random with a request to sign a petition in support of Hamas and free Palestine. Once they agreed, he insisted on quoting them the small print. Always good to read the small print, which included the slaughter of every Jew, Christian and non-Muslim in the world, making homosexuality a criminal offence, and the implementation of a system of Sharia law that would ban women from showing their knees or hair, playing sport in public, or travelling without a man's permission. Naturally, all his would-be backers responded by performing an abrupt U-turns. But this grotesque level of ignorance about the true nature of Hamas means that many in the West are susceptible to the terrorists' propaganda. It says the truth is that for all its economic might and social sophistication, as well as the support of the leaders of the free world, Israel is losing the battle for hearts and minds on the street.
This is down in large part to the massive multimedia campaign based on a combination of fake news, bogus images, and a sinister manipulation of social media. Who would have thought that after putting up very openly video footage of their heinous activities and atrocities on the 7th of October, that Hamas could ever succeed in capturing hearts and minds? It's beyond belief. It befuddles the mind, and yet they have succeeded to do that very much with the shallow-minded. When it comes to propagandizing online, they have a massive inbuilt advantage. The world's Jewish population is 15.3 million, 0.2% of the global total. There are no fewer, in contrast, than 1.9 billion Muslims. That's 24%. Clearly, not every Muslim is a supporter of the psychopathic Hamas, and we're very grateful for that. But many are broadly sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and there has been polling, Simon, recently that has assessed the view on the street in Palestine, taking stats from the West Bank particularly, and the vast majority of Palestinians do support what Gaza did on the 7th of October. Civilians. This is a tragedy. And so to even give assent to or to have any sympathy with what happened or try to rationalize it or excuse it is playing right into Hamas's anti-Israel agenda. And this means that the Israeli influencers face an uphill struggle to make headway on sites such as TikTok. In the final week of October, the hashtag Stand with Palestine had 251 million views on the video hosting site, while Stand with Israel had just 65 million. Not content with this numerical advantage, Hamas and its proxies, probably funded by Iran, resort to increasingly sophisticated dirty tricks to press home their advantage. Cyber companies hire bots, automated software programs to bombard pro-Israeli posts with hundreds of pro-Palestinian messages. Bots are also used to submit fake reports to Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok moderators in a bid to get accounts suspended or deactivated by alleging they're in breach of guidelines relating to anything from hateful or abusive content to suicide or self-harming. Another danger of social media is that it is actually designed to be an echo chamber. Users who view or search a particular topic are then offered more of the same sort of content, a process that only serves to confirm their prejudices.
And this is the algorithms that we see on social media, and particularly with the TikTok. So if you see a video of someone speaking or a video regarding in support of, say, for example, Free Palestine, the more you watch that, the more of the video content will come up on your TikTok news feed, and you're able to watch more and more of those videos. So probably a bit like YouTube Shorts then, in a sense.
Very much, and like Facebook Reels. In fact, all of the social media giants are producing these shorter versions of videos that you're able to produce. Instagram as well, and so it's very hard to escape from. When you go on various websites as well, when you accept cookies, those track your interests, and our devices, of course, monitor to a degree even our conversations and the environments in which we find ourselves, and so we'll churn out advertisements, petitions, videos that it deems to be in sync with your current ideological worldview. And so people are not going outside of their own bubble. They're not going outside of their own take. Simon, the weekend before my recent journey to India, I went out to the streets to the pro-Palestine rally, pro-Hamas rally, as it were, and I, very close to myself, an angel encountered a Gen Z girl with a man, a slightly older man, who I asked if I could ask some questions, and she was having a poster that said, "End the whitewashing of Israeli apartheid," was her poster, and she slightly nervously agreed to do a little interview, and I just first of all began with a question asking how she thought the march went, approaching it as a neutral, and what it was about. Well, it's all about, you know, a ceasefire, and we want Israel to stop attacking. So, okay, what would you say to someone who said this war was begun after a ceasefire that existed on October the 6th and was broken on October the 7th by the Hamas attacks? You would have thought, and indeed, perhaps she didn't actually have a clue about what happened on the October 7th attack. She began to stutter and stammer. The man who was with her said, "Do we have to get into the politics of this?"
I
said,
thought
well,
it's extremely political.
I said, hold on. I assumed, forgive me, I assumed that everyone knew this was a political thing, and Hamas is very relevant. It's a part, you know, you're wanting to talk about political things on Israel's side. What would you say to this? And I don't really know. She was honest enough to say, I don't really know too much about it. I said, okay, tell us about your poster. Oh, well, I can't really explain it that much. My mom made it for me. And we went on, and I just began to get this real sense. It's mob mentality. It's people going on social media, getting under the hashtag aura and thinking, right, I'm going to go and make a difference for these poor people who are suffering.
But isn't this also danger as well, that the tech companies are being used, and we see this from Hamas and their Iranian backers of actually sending these bots out and to essentially attack anything that's Israel. So if they're saying, so for example, the girl they interviewed probably pretty much would have been on kind of TikTok, said, I care about the situation facing the Palestinians, and will be fed constantly the same narrative.
Yes.
So in other words, we're seeing that with big tech and social media, it doesn't allow you to think for yourself, it tells you what to think. And this is the great danger facing Generation Z, and this is why I think there's a great danger they're being indoctrinated through social media platforms such as TikTok. Your generation, I know, is a bit more Instagram, kind of using that as a kind of platform. But that's the danger, isn't it? That people are not willing or wanting to find out something for themselves. And so therefore they have their own narrative or their preconceived idea that this, my friends have these views, so I'll have these views as well because I want to be popular. And the technology just allows and keeps that narrative without bringing in something different that would actually question that narrative in the first place. And I think this is what makes this new era that we're living in so dangerous. So another aspect of this one is that it says that there are plenty of content out there on social media. And since the advent of the smartphone, everyone is now a photographer. And thanks to Photoshop, a special effects expert too. One digitally doctoring picture of a giant Palestinian flag unfurled at a football match has been viewed millions of times, which is all fake. He says also that said, in the age of AI, which is artificial intelligence, there is no need to even go to the trouble of taking a photograph. AI tools such as DALL-E or Mid-Journey or Stable Diffusion are capable of creating uncanny, realistic images based on textual descriptions, and we see them there in front of us.
Six-fingered child.
Yeah, which is enough to give the game away. And also that child is wearing a Palestinian flag as well. What you don't see in the rest of the picture is his dead mother as well. So all these pictures are designed to generate hatred. Look at the Israelis bombing and killing children. When it's Hamas that have kidnapped children, it's Hamas that have kidnapped babies and taking them as hostages. Of course, any children get caught up in this conflict is horrific, but we have to lay the blame where the blame is due, and that's with Hamas.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is the big picture that people are missing in any war. First of all, war is always tragic. Sometimes war is sadly necessary. And what we are seeing is a shift of narrative where Israel are the aggressors. Israel actually waited several weeks. In fact, the Israeli government made itself very unpopular with many people who have supported it because of what was seen to be unnecessary delays in launching a ground offensive in Gaza. And that was to plan, that was to properly strategize, and that was also to give what is, in no other arena of war, something that you find ample warning and time for Palestinian civilians to locate to designated safe zones.
Absolutely. And I think an important part of this narrative as well is, can't re-emphasize this enough and enough and enough, is that Israel is facing asymmetrical warfare. In other words, Hamas hide behind women and children as human shields, and probably including hostages. They deliberately want Israel to kill as many civilians as possible so they can use this as propaganda. And also don't forget that the Hamas leaders that are living very nicely in Doha, in Qatar, are making billions out of this conflict. Literally, they are multi-billionaires because of this conflict, and using terror as a means to make financial gain while suppressing their own people. And all they've done in Gaza is to create a terror state. Now, also the article talks about how Israel's largest news website reported earlier this month that anyone can write a line such as 2 Palestinian children covered in blood standing amid the rubble of a building in Gaza Strip next to their mother's body, and the generator will do whatever they wish. And we've seen those 2 generated images there that have been produced by AI. They look very realistic, but obviously they are designed to stir up emotion that Israelis are children killers. Look at what Israel is doing. This is horrific. And this is really the spiritual battle, as well as the spiritual battle being waged on social media right now.
Additionally, the U.S. have polled that 1 in 10 members of Gen Z and millennials view Hamas, again, Hamas, not Palestine, not Palestinians, Hamas, a designated terror organization, positively. According to a recent article published by the Daily Mail online entitled 1 in 10 members of Gen Z and young millennials have a positive view of Hamas terrorists, according to exclusive poll. 1 in 10 young Americans aged 18 to 29 has a positive view of terrorist organization Hamas, despite the group's murderous attack on Israel last week that killed more than 1,300 men, women, and children. Although almost 2/3 of all Americans take a negative view of Iran-backed Hamas in an exclusive DailyMail.com poll, that number drops to 40% among Gen Z and young millennials. At the same time, they're the least likely age group to hold a positive view of Israel. The results reflect how college campuses have become a flashpoint for protest regarding the conflict. You can see some of the polling there that show the 18 to 29-year-olds are the only group to have a negative overall view of Israel, and the breakdown by age, sex, and political affiliation. Even there you have only 50% of Republicans have a very positive overall view of Israel. The rest, 16%, quite positive. But somewhat, I think I can say, troublingly, more than 25% have a don't know, quite negative or very negative view, even among Republicans. American attitudes to Israel's response to Hamas attack. There's 50% who believe that full invasion occupation of Gaza is reasonable, and it's equally spread between unreasonable, don't know, neither reasonable or unreasonable. You know, it's really unhelpful people to sit on the fence. Most of those will actually be aiding the side of lack of reason. Only 4 in 10 18 to 29-year-olds have a negative view of Hamas. Look at that.
That's disturbing.
Look at how disturbing that is. And even, you know, if you go to 65 plus, you have 64%. They have a very negative view. 45 to 64-year-olds, 62%. 30 to 44-year-olds, which we've. You're in the 45 plus.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm in the other 54%. Then 18 to 29-year-olds. Look at that. There's only 23% who have a very negative view. It's really quite horrifying to read those polls. And indeed, I've seen as well, Simon, in the U.S., I believe it was, a video footage of a school where Gen Z students were upper high school, is what we're talking about, upper high school, beginning university age. And they went into lockdown because of a teacher who had attended a pro-Israel event and had a sign which was it was a pro-Israel sign. There was nothing offensive about it. It was backing Israel in this. And there was a borderline riot in the school, students trashing the inside of it. The teacher had to be locked for hours in her office, and the school went into lockdown.
But we've seen this in our universities.
We've
seen this a few years ago at London School of Economics, for example, where my good friend Sharon Claff was brutally attacked for being Jewish, and by Jeremy Corbyn supporters and stuff as well. So we see that there are major problems on campus, and of course this is where this Generation Z, are being influenced particularly by TikTok, and we see then the Hamas influence that actually comes in. But it's also important to realize that Israel is acknowledging that Israel has to deal with not only the war itself, but also the diplomatic war that follows, together with the media war, trying to win the narrative and the truth of what's actually happening, which is very difficult in times of war. And now Israel also has to deal with the social media war. So we have this excellent CBN news report of the challenges facing Israel. And this is from an incredible Jewish American spokeswoman.
Tishby is no stranger in the fight against anti-Jewish hatred, and that hatred has only risen since the Israel-Hamas war began. Following the October 7th Hamas attack, a significant spike in anti-Semitic incidents have been reported across the U.S. Cases of harassment, vandalism, and assault have jumped by almost 400%. Tishby recently told the Friends of the Israel Defense Forces that underlying messaging paved the way for the Hamas attack and the atmosphere that followed.
The grooming, ongoing grooming of Western civilization through universities, the media, and social media, so that when the time came and the Islamic Nazis carried out the act of genocide, many in the West would celebrate it, justify it, and no longer tell the difference between good and evil.
Pro-Palestinian protests have broken out worldwide on college campuses and in major cities. Protesters have gone as far as ripping down posters of Jewish hostages still held captive by Hamas.
It's just horrifying to me how American youth have been brainwashed so badly to think that tearing down a photo of a kidnapped child is God's work. It defies logic on so many levels. It's fine if you don't agree with Israeli policies. That's totally okay. You don't like the government. That's totally fine. What is your excuse when there's been an intent to kidnap a child or to rape a child or to murder or behead a baby?
In September, Tishby reached through renowned entertainment Variety magazine to write about the dangers of anti-Semitism masquerading as anti-Zionism, the movement for the self-determination and statehood of the Jewish people in their ancestral homeland.
This obsessive hatred towards Israel is nothing but anti-Semitism in disguise. So when the Variety thing came out, I wrote an epilogue afterwards to just be like, I wrote this before this happened, and here it is upon us.
Tishby condemns the phrase "from the river to the sea," a rallying cry at many pro-Palestinian demonstrations.
The river is the Jordan River, the sea is the Mediterranean Sea, and from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free means ethnically cleansing the Jews from their ancestral land. There is no other meaning to it.
She also pushes back against those trying to equate October 7th with Israel's military campaign in Gaza, while also condemning the Hamas act of hiding behind innocent Palestinians.
Hamas have effectively turned Gaza into a terrorist base, and the entire city. Their intent is to use Palestinian people as human shields and get as many casualties as they possibly can while their leaders are hiding underground. The blood is on Hamas's hands.
Meanwhile, Tishby warns this entire moment should be seen as a wake-up call to other countries. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thankful as always for the very helpful perspective there from our friends at CBN. And controversy erupted at Harvard University, where the Harvard Palestine Solidarity Committee said Israel was entirely responsible for all unfolding violence. This truly beggars belief, even as evidence emerged that Hamas terrorist gunmen had murdered children.
Yeah, this is the Daily Mail language, so let's call them terrorists for the sake of this one. And we're not calling them a group either. These are a genocidal terrorist organisation that is committed to Israel's destruction. It's in their covenant charter, not only to destroy the nation of Israel, but to destroy and eradicate Jews from around the world. It's Max of Mein Kampf, Hitler's book. Mein Kampf, the influence and the Nazi influence is so big you can't get away from it. But this is what troubles me. I mean, Reagan, being a university student back in the 90s, it was challenging enough for Israel on campus back then, but now it's absolutely horrific. I mean, I fear for so many Jewish students who have to hide their Jewish identity when they're on campus. I mean, the Islamic Society tried to ban the JSOC, which is the Jewish Union, when I was at the University of Manchester, all because Benjamin Netanyahu opened the tunnel next to the Western Wall, and the Palestinian Authority took that as an opportunity then to attack the IDF, and Israel was involved in the conflict with the Palestinian Authority forces for about 10 days. Out of that, the world's media was pretty much in uproar like we see today, and the Islamic community tried to ban JSOC because of its association with Israel as a pretext to take over the Union. Now that was in the mid-90s, so the fact that we are now 2023, Jewish students find it very difficult now to stand up for Israel. They find it difficult to be associated with Israel, and probably find it extremely difficult now to be Jewish, or even to be an Israeli on campus as well, throughout the West, is absolutely frightening. And of course, this is now where the breeding ground for the new generation of leaders, business leaders, political leaders who are at university are being indoctrinated with this hatred for Israel. And it's all coming through the influence of social media, and particularly this new platform, TikTok.
Well, L Partners polled 1,000 people for DailyMail.com to get a snapshot of American attitudes to Israel, Hamas, and the unfolding conflict. The results show how decades of U.S. support for Israel cannot be taken for granted with the younger generation. James Johnson, co-founder of JL Partners, said only 4 in 10 18 to 29-year-old Americans have a negative view of Hamas. You read that right. Throughout our poll, Generation Z are the misfits of American public opinion on Israel. They're the only group that have a negative view on Israel. They are most likely to give Iran the benefit of the doubt for responsibility for the attack. They support anti-Israel protests over the last week, and they are the only group to say any Israeli military response would be unreasonable. They are not just a statistical quirk. They are the generation in our universities, the generation undertaking their careers, and the generation that will be the future leaders of tomorrow. So although 63% of all Americans say that they have a negative view of Hamas, the figure is much lower among the youngest group surveyed, even though the poll ran from Tuesday to Thursday last week at a time when bloody images of the group's trail of destruction were prominently in the news.
Can I just make it a point? This article was written only a few days after the mass terrorist attack on October the 7th. This article and this poll
It was fresh.
was not conducted last week when Israel's in a full-blown military operation.
This is right after the heinous terror atrocities of Hamas. People expressing support for Hamas or negative views towards Israel and positive views towards Hamas right after those attacks. It's absolutely deplorable, but I find it highly believable. Simon, someone who I viewed as a friend who would fit in this category, was waxing lyrical on X, formerly known as Twitter, about Israel's apartheid and genocide and heinous actions and stuff. And when I sought to say, look, in a calm way, I don't want to debate you online, but let's meet up and talk about this, because I know you've not been, I know you've not seen, I know you've not studied. Let's have a chat about it. Nothing. No, I'm sorry for your family's disappointment. I'm sorry for what you may be going through, but bum, 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 and starts rambling on about nonsense that he doesn't have a clue of.
But so many people are, though. This is the ignorance of this.
Yes, it's ignorant.
I mean, one thing concerns me the most, and the fact that Israel is on the front line. Those Jewish Israeli communities next to the Gaza Strip were not only protecting Israel, but they are protecting the West from this dangerous Islamist ideology that is part of the Muslim Brotherhood, that is part of the Islamist fascist ideology that Hamas holds, that this will spread to the West. And we've already seen this infiltrated with Generation Z, pretty much also with the millennial generation through social media. And so therefore, what we're allowing with this Hamas propaganda to affect the hearts and minds of people not coming out and protecting Israel is that this is actually endangering the West. The West is in great peril. The West is in great danger because Israel is on the front line in this battle against Islamic extremism, right? So do you think that they were going to allow if Hamas destroys Israel, then Europe's next? What are they going to do? They're going to bring about Sharia law and all these so-called values that are supported by Generation Z, these liberal progressive values. Where are they going to go in the face of Hamas's ideology? Is Hamas going to be tolerant of these progressive liberal ideas that they think they can live the life that they want to live? No, they'll be living under an Islamic dictatorship, under the extreme version of Islamic Sharia law. If you don't abide with what Hamas is wanting to do, you're dead. There is no opposition. There is no alternative voices. There is no liberalism with Hamas. It's either our way or no way, and that means death. It's a cult. It's a death cult. And this is the ideology that Hamas believes in, and this is why it's so imperative that people think for themselves, look and reason with the facts, and then make a valid, reasonable judgment from that, and build your arguments, not based on ignorance and lies and propaganda.
At the University of Washington last week, video footage captured several Jewish students in tears as they pleaded with an administrator to put a stop to a pro-Palestinian rally. Students taking part appear to condone violence against Israel and the Jewish people. "They want our people dead. They want us killed," sobbed one student to an administrator who appears to be listening, indicating that there is nothing he can do. "How are you allowing this? Why aren't you putting a stop to this?" she asked through uncontrollable tears. "Please end it, please," she begged. The event at the campus's Red Square had been advertised by a radical student group who said their goal was to uplift the just Palestinian resistance and condemn the settler colonial state of Israel. Absolute nonsense.
Absolutely. So let's go to this excellent news report from CBN, and this is one of the pro-Palestinian marches or Hamas marches that we've seen in Washington DC, and we've seen enough of this in our streets in London, in Cardiff, in Glasgow, in Belfast, Newcastle, and in Birmingham and other major cities across the United Kingdom. This same level of hatred against Israel and the Jewish people that is causing an epidemic rise in Jew hatred that is making the Jewish community feel very scared and very vulnerable at this time.
These protests are gaining strength as the Israel-Hamas war deepens.
Pro-Palestinian movements like this have been sprouting up all over the world. Here at the March on Washington, there's upwards of 30,000 people here. That's according to a permit from the National Park Service. And their main call is to free Palestine.
Free, free Palestine!
We are an opponent of the political ideology of Zionism, which we view as a racist ideology that aims to justify the expulsion of indigenous people from their land, in this case, the Palestinian people.
Walter Smolarek with Answer Coalition helped coordinate the event. Still, a Harvard Caps Harris poll led by pollster Mark Penn shows an 84% majority of Americans support Israel over Hamas. Penn found a growing divide of support between generations.
As 95% of those over 65 supported Israel, and only 52% of those 18 to 24 supported Israel. I think the younger generation in 18 to 24 is likely to not to have been to Israel. They weren't even here for 9/11, not to have a set of personal experiences related to terrorism, and to be more susceptible to information that they hear online instead.
Social media experts go as far as labeling younger generations as digital natives because they get most of their news on social media, which has fewer safeguards on misinformation and bad actors manipulating public opinion.
Media shapes consciousness, and consciousness shapes culture.
Kinchlow sees platforms like Facebook, Instagram, and especially TikTok as digital battlegrounds vying for public opinion.
And so now you have this whole generation of kids, that's what they're used to when it comes to taking in news. They don't go fact check, they don't take another person's opinion.
Another major concern is Penn's polling data shows 16% of Americans side with Hamas terrorists.
And I think it's unjust and unfair to make this about Hamas every single time.
You would have thought that a terrorist attack against innocent civilians would engender sympathy for Israel, but somehow it seems to have weirdly stirred up a pot of anti-Semitism, at least in some areas and with some communities.
This is why Penn sees the greatest threat to America from this great divide being the anti-Semitism and violence that follows on both sides. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Brody Carter, CBN News.
Well, now let's talk a little bit about Generation Z and TikTok and the revelations that TikTok has concerning Generation Z. According to an article by Fanbytes, marketing to Generation Z, and TikTok is where you should be. But what do young people love about the platform, and what does that say about them? Here's all you need to know. TikTok has over 2 billion downloads, and in 2021 it was 60% Gen Z. Now that stat is over 40%, but not because Gen Z is leaving. Quite the opposite, and here's the latest on that. There's no point fishing in an empty pond. If you're looking to reach Gen Z, TikTok is the place to find your catch. Our own research shows it's this generation's favorite social media platform, Fanbytes says, and it's where they're most likely to interact with brands. TikTok has changed the way we consume social media. Its recommendation algorithm serves users content based on interest rather than interpersonal connections. And this focus on passion over popularity clearly speaks to Gen Z. It was founded, it goes back, it's rooted in an app called musical.ly, specializing in lip sync videos. A Chinese tech company, ByteDance, seized the opportunity to merge this app with its own Douyin. The international version of this would become TikTok. The platform became the fastest growing app in 2020 and has now risen to reach 1 billion monthly active global users. You can't ignore its influence, especially among young audiences. Over half of Gen Z consumers were on TikTok in 2021. 46% of 13 to 19-year-olds said they were using the platform daily. Nowadays, this generation makes up over 40% of the app's users. And the question then is, why has there been a 6% drop? Zoomers aren't leaving the app. In fact, according to our data, 69% of Gen Z say they've had an account, and 34% claim it's the platform they spend the most time on. The reason the total percentage of Gen Z on the app is decreasing is because TikTok is growing. Millennials and older generations are getting on board, joining TikTok and enjoying what it has to offer as well, making the audience pool that much wider. TikTok has a discovery feed customized to each individual user, with the For You page, or FYP, delivering curated content upon entering the app. As soon as you enter the app, there's videos that begin to play. You don't ask them to play, they just begin to play, and then you can watch and it keeps going to new video.
Scroll to next
new video. You don't even have to touch it. You can just let it go, and it will either go in a cycle and repeat or play next to new video. The TikTok algorithm tracks watch-through rates, likes, comments, and shares to work out what interests the user most. And this personalization resonates with Gen Z and means they don't really have to do anything or searching out. It's there for them on platter.
It also says that a study showed that 41% of Generation Z would provide their data for personal experience. That's a mighty number when you think about the rising reluctance to hand out information online. So Gen Z are more likely to engage when you've taken their wants, needs and desires into consideration. Generation Z or TikTok users know that the more content they consume, the more tailored and better their experience will be. The constant stream of short-form videos of TikTok helped it differentiate from other social platforms. Its catchy, video-first identity that makes the app unique. Other social media platforms have adapted this to compete, such as Instagram introduced Reels, YouTube introduced YouTube Shorts. Facebook integrated the watch feed, and Snapchat's remix feature is a similar to TikTok's Duet, but TikTok holds the crown for the video-first visuals. Its offering is nearly centered on this. So Generation Z, this is the shocking element of this, are the most likely age group to watch videos on social media. Now, Generation Z watches over 7.2 hours of videos daily, so TikTok is the place to capture their attention, as we can see as an example of how TikTok works. We see also then that Generation Z TikTokers aren't just downloading and absorbing content, they're creating it. 83% of TikTokers have created a video for themselves. Since the platform makes it so easy to create, it's also intuitive in the in-app features and simple interface. It's no wonder Generation Z are ready to put their content there.
So this is where we have anyone can go viral, anyone can speak with same volume as big brands or influencers, and this makes it a particularly potent social media giant. But troublingly, this means that it is very easy for extremist material to be viewed by anyone and everyone, and for that same material to go viral and find itself celebrated. And this is certainly the case with bin Laden's letter to America, which recently went viral on TikTok. In a recent article published by the Daily Mail entitled Anti-Israel Gen Zers Send Bin Laden's 2002 Letter to America Viral, Terror Chief's 9/11 justification wins support among pro-Palestine Americans who claim their eyes have been opened after The Guardian linked to it. I mean, what weird alternate history this truly is.
This is what's so disturbing.
A vile letter written by the warlord behind the 9/11 atrocities has gone viral on TikTok, with users saying that reading it has led them to understand why the horrific attacks were carried out in 2001. Perhaps you can walk us through this.
Yeah, so the article says that Osama bin Laden, who founded the terror group Al-Qaeda, with the aim of waging holy war on the Western world, wrote a letter to America in 2002 to defend the motivation behind his murderous attacks on the American mainland and that killed thousands of innocent people. In the viral letter, bin Laden spews anti-American, anti-Semitic and anti-Western viewpoints, citing one of the main reasons for 9/11 was US support for Israel. And it says at the time of writing, videos with the hashtag letter to America have been viewed 7.3 million times. Extraordinary, the majority are claiming support for the twisted reasoning bin Laden lays out without a thought for the freedoms he criticises. The letter began to gain traction in the UK through The Guardian, linked to a 2002 article which translated in full a piece about the ongoing Israel-Hamas war. The link to the letter spread, with hundreds of TikTokers posting videos in response to reading it, in which they appear to confuse the hate diatribe for an intellectual think piece. It says here that various trending videos about the letter include no context about bin Laden's life as a jihadist, in which his followers slaughtered thousands of Muslims and non-Muslims alike, or his support for some of the most oppressive political regimes imaginable. In other sections of his correspondence, bin Laden blames the US government for spreading AIDS through the world, described homosexuality is immoral, and sought to turn America into an oppressive religious state, very similar to that of Afghanistan.
The trend appears to have started with TikToker Lynette Adkins, who posted a video on November the 14th. I need everyone to stop what they're doing right now and go read. It's literally 2 pages. Go read A Letter to America, she said. I mean, you can just hear the shrillness of it. Oh, you need to read this manifesto by a terrorist. It's inspired me. That's essentially what's coming out here.
It's funny. I mean, look at the other ones as well. I mean, this one said, the American people are the ones who pay taxes which fund the planes that bomb us in Afghanistan, the tanks that strike and destroy our homes in Palestine, the armies which occupy our lands in the Arabian Gulf, and the fleets which ensure the blockade of Iraq, bin Laden wrote. Said, for this reason, the Saudi Arabian terrorists wrote all Americans and Jewish people were culpable of the crimes committed by the Americans and the Jews against Muslims. Says here that, and then we see the response from this one. It says, come back here and let me know what you think, because I feel like I'm going through an existential crisis right now, and lots of people are. So I just need someone else to be feeling this too. So this video prompted more than 5,000 replies. One
I'm
said,
not feeling it.
This one said, just read it. My eyes have been opened, one person responded. I think this has a lot of people realise that even the villains can speak truth. We've been lied to our entire lives. I remember watching people cheer when Osman bin Laden was found and killed. I was a child and it confused me. It still confuses me today. The world deserves better, and what this country has done to them, another person said.
On her TikTok bio page, Lynette Adkins has a link to a fundraising page for, quote, Palestinian rights. Adkins followed up her original post with several others. In one, she celebrates TikTok's influence on America's youth. TikTok is going to save this generation. Her reasoning is that older people are programmed to think a certain way. In September 2023, Adkins' meteoric rise from lowly Amazon employee to influencer was the subject of a Los Angeles Times feature. In another video, Adkins recommends her followers watch 3 documentary films, including one, Out of Shadows, which prompted one reviewer to remark, the so-called documentary is merely a mask for a hodgepodge of conspiracy theories associated with QAnon and its linear ancestor Pizzagate. Another movie promoting 9/11 conspiracy theories, including one that suggests the U.S. was behind the attack. In her latest post, Adkins said, America is losing the PR war bad, and that they were trying to shut TikTok down. Well, yeah, they may be losing the PR war, because primarily its youth and its citizens are going after these terror agendas. They are falling hook, line, and sinker for narratives which are completely antithetical to the Judeo-Christian worldview.
Absolutely, and there's a great danger there that that bin Laden becomes idolized, Al-Qaeda becomes idolized, the Islamic regime becomes idolized, and no thought whatsoever into how oppressive these terrorist organizations are and how oppressive they are to their own people. And in our struggle against Islamic extremism, this sounds to me like complete surrender. In the face of evil, and this is what we're facing, that this is pure evil. That what America faced on 9/11, what Israel faced with the biggest massacre in its history on the 7th of October, again, is pure evil. And what we're seeing on our streets across the Western world is a rise of evil. But when it comes to TikTok, isn't it imperative that any grandparents or any parents watching this program today needs to understand how your children or your children are actually viewing TikTok, how it works, but also how to engage Generation Z with the gospel and with pro-Israel video and content actually on this social media platform.
Well, it's absolutely critical. Now, my preference would be for children not to have smartphones up to a certain age, even 16 years of age. I think it's a good model, maybe even 18 if you can push it. But beyond that, they're going to be in schools where they will be introduced to these sorts of things, and parents, grandparents truly need to be aware of the dangers, and they need to be educating children. It's no good shielding children, because you will fail to shield them effectively. Don't shield them, but interact with them, introduce them to the truth. If you think you're shielding them, you're not. They're going to be exposed to these things in one way or another, with or without you. If you are the one to expose them to the truth, then they will be equipped to combat the lies.
And also it's important as well that we know that God raises up godly men and women in each generation. It's time for Generation Z to arise and to be leaders in your generation, to not only share the gospel, the good news of the gospel, the saving power of Jesus Christ, but also to show the truth of Israel's cause, to understand exactly what this fight is about between good and evil, and what is right and what is wrong and what is righteous.
And it's important that we produce gospel material that focuses on what's good, right, and true, that we advocate for Israel openly, even on TikTok and on social media. So think and pray about how you might even be able to do that. Yes, there may be security concerns, but we have to even be willing to take risks for the sake of the gospel. So get out there and start proclaiming the truth, educate yourself, be able to interact, equip yourself against the arguments that you'll certainly face. Thank you so much for joining us on Behind the Headlines. Thank you, Simon. Great.
Pleasure, Reagan. Thank you very much. And I want to thank you for watching at home. Generation Z, this is your time to raise up to proclaim the truth of the gospel and the truth of Israel's righteous cause. So thank you for watching this week's edition of Behind the Headlines.